Well, the Black Ops 2 video popped off. Like, a lot. Holy crap. I want to say thank you all for checking that out. People in the comments suggested that I take a look at the guns of Call of Duty Ghosts, since the game is set in a similar time period, and it works as an interesting point to compare InfinityWard's accuracy to Treyarch's. So let's get started. Same tier list system as we used for Black Ops 2, but we'll do a short review. At the top of the tier list, we have the in-service tier, where the guns go that are currently in active duty with a military or police force somewhere in the world. After that, we have the in-service different name tier, where guns that are currently being used but have been given different names for legal purposes will be deposited. The was in service tier will contain weapons that are no longer in service after being adopted by a military or police force. The never adopted tier will go to weapons that were never officially adopted but did make it past the prototype stage, which is the next tier on the list. Finally, we have the does not exist tier, where weapons that are entirely invented for this game will be placed. Before we start, I will again not be including any DLC weapons. And here's why. So if you look right here, you'll see this was $50 for 4 DLCs, right? And only 2 of them have guns, right? So only these 2 have the guns. These 2 don't. Also, the descriptions are swapped. The Maverick should go down here. It's the assault rifle, sniper rifle, and the Ripper is the submachine gun assault rifle. But yeah, I used to have the DLC for these games. I had these 2 for the new guns, and but that was for the 360 version, which is apparently a different game. So the DLC doesn't carry over. So I just don't have it now. So yeah, that's why I'm not doing that. But they would both go in the does not exist tier. Let's begin how we started last time, with the secondary weapons. Pistols first, then launchers. We begin our list with the pistols. To start us off, we have the M9A1, a weapon that is a variant of an InfinityWard staple, the M9. The A1 gives it a rail that has been fitted by InfinityWard with a non-functioning flashlight. It also has a weird Picatinny rail on the top that I've never seen on a real M9 or M9A1. It also has an incorrect magazine capacity for its caliber, and it kinda looks too small. Maybe that's just me, but it should be pretty huge. Anyway, it's basically a future version of a real gun which, although being phased out, is still technically in service. Next, we'll go to one that is very similar to one that showed up in the last game. This is the 44 Magnum, which is based on the Taurus Raging Bull, which is sort of similar to the Executioner's real-life inspiration, the Raging Judge. I got it wrong in the last video. The trademark red line on the grip that Taurus puts on all their revolvers is missing, but this is fairly accurate. They added a Picatinny rail on this one too, but that doesn't make it any more useful to real militaries, so it goes in the never adopted tier. The next gun is one that people really liked for about 3 games, and then never again after that. It was in Brink, this game, and then Advanced Warfare, and then nobody gave a damn about it. I am speaking, of course, about the VBR Belgium PDW, referred to in this game as the PDW. You guys should go to the VBR Belgium website if you want to see a real blast from the past, by the way. Nobody really gave a damn about this gun, and it doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. I'm not even sure it's actually real. However, I think it is, so I'm going to put it in the never adopted tier. By the way, no, it is not gold in real life. Next is a classic 9mm staple of many games, movies, and TV shows. The P226 is one of my favorite handguns in real life and in this game. One of the main guns used in the campaign, in Extinction, and in multiplayer, this gun is heavily based on the real gun by the same name made by Sig Sauer. Specifically, it is based on the Mark 25 version used by the Navy SEALs, which is still, yes, in service. Last but not least is the Russian handgun used by the bad guys in the campaign, the MP443 Grach? I don't know. It is chambered in the Russian version of 9mm Parabellum and can take standard NATO cartridges as well. It was adopted by the armed forces and multiple police organizations throughout Russia from 2003 onwards, but some police organizations still use the old Makarov pistol instead, simply because it's so ubiquitous. Like I said, however, it is in service. Our first launcher is the Castet, which is the nickname of the real-life RGM-40 Castet launcher. It's a standalone version of the GP30 grenade launcher, the latter of which you will often see attached to AK rifles in both games and real life. This version is not in use by the Russian military, but it is in service by the Russian Interior Ministry. Our next weapon is the Mark 32, which sucks and I hate it. It is a 2-round burst sticky grenade launcher, which sounds cool until you realize that the second grenade is basically useless after the recoil hits you from the first, and ugh. Anywho, it's based on the Milcor MGL, commonly known in America as the M32 MGL, used by the Marines and US SOCOM under that designation, and since M and Mark are basically interchangeable, I'm gonna let InfinityWard have this one. It still sucks though. In service. Our last launcher is the Panzerfaust, which is based on the real-life Panzerfaust 3-IT. I didn't realize the Panzerfaust was still what the Germans called their rocket launchers, but not only is it a real weapon, it is currently being used right now in Ukraine to blow up Russians. Slava Ukraini, boys! In service tier. Technically, there's another launcher that is a kill streak, but I'm not going to include it on the tier list. It's based on the Gustav M3 or the MAAWS, depending on who you are, and it is also in service in Ukraine. Moving on to the primaries, our first shotgun is also our weirdest. The Metal Storm Maul is a shotgun that loads using a magazine tube that is also the barrel. Side note, when you reload the Bulldog and the player slaps the tip of the barrel to make it go in, that makes me want to die. Anyway, it is a real gun, but the company who made it is defunct now. Interestingly, it was almost in service in Papua New Guinea for their correctional services, but the company went out of business before they could produce them. I think this goes in the prototype tier because I don't think any of these ever actually sold. Next is our TAC-12 shotgun, which is actually a UTAS UTS-15. This is a Turk shit shotgun, and like so many other Turk shit shotguns, but this one is actually in service. The Turkish version of the Navy SEALs uses it, but obviously it is under a different name, so it goes in that tier. Our next shotgun is the MTS-255 revolving shotgun, based on a real revolving shotgun of the same name out of Russia. The Wikipedia article does say that there is a police variant made for law enforcement agencies, but when you scroll to the users tab, the two countries that use it only say it's approved as a hunting weapon for civilians. I think that this goes in the never adopted tier until I am proved otherwise, in which case I'll correct it in the pinned comment below. Our last shotgun is one I forgot to get footage for in my original one. Yeah, you get it. The FP6. It's based on a real gun by the same name, created by an Italian company called Fab Arm and sold by German manufacturer HK. It is currently in service by the GSG-9, the Pascal in Malaysia, and the National Gendarmerie of France. Up first in the snipers, we have the Lynx, based on the GM6 Lynx anti-material rifle out of Hungary. Hungarian forces use this weapon and its 5 predecessors, along with Indian Special Forces and the People's Movement for the Liberation of Azawad in Mali, which is known as the MPLA in French, so you may confuse it with the MPLA that Jonas Savimbi was really upset about in Black Ops 2. They are, however, different things. In-service tier. Next up, we have the VKS, or as I like to call it, the VKS. It's another 50 caliber bullpup anti-materiel rifle, this time out of Russia, and with a huge integral suppressor. The FSB has been using this rifle for over 20 years as of January 2025. In service. The L115 is next, and this is sort of a busted version of the L115A2 variant, using some right-handed and some left-handed parts, which in reality could not fit together. The L115 is still in service with the British military to this day, despite its predecessor being created in a fucking shed by 3 random dudes. Last up for snipers is the USR, based on the Remington 700 USR model, which I think used to be in service in Australia based on this Reddit post. However, the Wikipedia page says that the only Australian agency still using the Remington 700 is the New South Wales Police Force State Protection Group. I don't know if they're specifically using this variant either. I don't know if anyone is using this variant. I'm going to put it in the was in service tier, and I'll correct myself in the pinned comment if I get any corrections with sources in the comments. A new class of weapon for this game specifically. The Marksman rifles are the stop between the ARs and the sniper rifles. First up, we have the SVU, which returns from Black Ops 2 and has the exact same spot on the tier list. Go watch that video to find out more. Next up, we have the MR28, which is an HK G28, but it is given a name that combines the 28 from the German military designation with the MR from the MR308. The civilian version. This is a real weapon that is in service with the German military, like I said, but under a different name. The IA-2 is the name given to our next weapon, which, in real life, is referred to as simply the IA-2. I'm not going to dock them any points for the dash, as this weapon is now the main service weapon of the Brazilian Armed Forces. It is an upgraded version of the trusty FAL, and I have a cool picture with my dad's FAL that I forgot to include in my last video. Enjoy! In service. Our last weapon is the Mark 14, an upgraded version of the M14 that the US military still uses because we can't admit that it's kind of a shitty rifle. It's currently used as a DMR, which is, like I said, sort of a mix between an AR and a sniper rifle. Interestingly, both the Free Syrian Army and the Islamic State were both using it, which means they could have been shooting at each other with the same gun. In service. First up, we have the M27 IAR returning from Black Ops 2 to serve in its proposed SAW, or Squad Automatic Weapon, format. But interestingly, the Marines have decided to not use it like a normal SAW, which lays down a large amount of fire to keep the enemy suppressed. Instead, Marine riflemen lay down accurate fire on the enemies in semi-auto or short-controlled bursts. So while this gun gets the same spot as it does for the Black Ops 2 tier list, it should be known that it is used entirely differently. Our next is the LSAT, which also makes its return from Black Ops 2, and it has a really awesome and punchy sound effect. Prototype tier, again, go watch that Black Ops video for more. Next is Lil Wayne's magnum opus, A Milli. Jean-Pierre Jeunet's magnum opus, Amelie. Setme's magnum opus, the Amelie. It's a real gun chambered in 5.56 that uses the same-ish sort of design as the MG34/42. You may notice the resemblance. This weapon is again used by Pascal out of Malaysia, who uses all kinds of weird guns. They're the guys who adopted the XM8 I talked about in the last video. And they are also in service in Ukraine. Last is our weirdest one, the Chainsaw, which is based on a gun that has the same name but with no space between the words by Knight's Armament Company. As you can see, it's an LMG held like a chainsaw and which is fired from the hip. It even has a 40mm grenade launcher under the barrel. It was a prototype shown off in 2009 and still has not been sold yet, probably because it's a really dumb and inaccurate gun that basically only exists because of the pun. The MTAR is back as the MTAR X, which is closer but still not the name of the gun. They're calling it an SMG for some reason, in spite of the fact that it is clearly shooting 5.56 rounds and using 5.56 mags. Same tier as last time. The Vector is back as well, this time as the Vector CRB, which is the designation for the civilian variant that has a 16-inch barrel. This goes in a different tier from last time, since the CRB is a different thing. So, in service, different name. Let's get to the new guns already. To start, we have the Vepr, which is sort of like the MTAR X in that it's not an SMG and is clearly firing rifle rounds. It is a Ukrainian bullpup AK, which is currently in service against the Russian invaders. Next up, we have the K7, a South Korean copy of the MP5SD, which was cheaper to create than importing an HK. I feel you, South Koreans. HKs are expensive here too. South Korea still uses this design, and interestingly, so too does Iran, reportedly, in service. Next up, we have the Bizon, based on the real PP-19 Bizon 2, or as I like to call it, the PP-19. It was designed by both the son of Mikhail Kalashnikov and the son of Yevgeny Dragunov. Interestingly, the Bizon uses the weird helical magazine, but doesn't use the main benefit of having such a weird mag, the large capacity. In multiplayer, the default mag size is just 32, and which only goes up to 54 with stendo mags. In real life, it should hold 64. Might as well have just used the Vityaz, which is the same gun but with conventional banana mags that hold 32 rounds. Still, the gun is in service even though it is being phased out by the Vityaz because the weird helical mag sucks. Lastly, we have the CBJ-MS, based on a real Swedish gun by the same name, made in part by the Saab Bofors company, which makes a ton of military shit, including that MAAWS thing that I mentioned earlier in the launchers. Go look them up. Anyway, the CBJ-MS is a cool PDW design that uses both 9mm and a proprietary 6.5mm cartridge that has an armor-piercing tungsten carbide penetrator, along with other loadings. The CBJ can be swapped back and forth relatively easily and can even be used as the saw for a squad because it comes with a 100-round drum magazine, though that's not in this game. It is such a shame that it still has not yet been adopted. Prototype tier. Here we go, the main event. Let's start with the AK-12, a modernized and upgraded version of the AK-74, which is currently in use by both sides in the war in Ukraine, with the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces managing to capture a number of them and put them to use against the Rusky bastards invading their homeland. Next up is probably the most appropriate weapon for the Federation, the game's South American antagonists. This is the FAD, a Peruvian rifle that was adopted in 2008 for use by the Peruvian government against the Shining Path, a communist uprising in the country which has been fighting a civil war since the 1980s. This weapon is currently in service. After that, we have the Italian ARX-160, which I can personally say is in service because I saw Italian soldiers armed with the weapon when I went to Rome in October 2016. Sadly, I didn't get any photos, but they were guarding various street corners because it was the 2016 Jubilee and the Pope was in town. They look really cool, and I want one. In service. Next is the SA-805, which is based on the original CZ-805 Bren/Bren A1, which, as of 2024, has been supplanted by the Bren 3, which has several improvements over the original design and is also really cool, and I also want one of those. Interestingly, the A1 is still in service now, but the phase-out program will actually be completed later this year. However, in countries like Vietnam, Mexico, Argentina, and the Philippines, they still use the A1 model in some roles. In-service tier. Let's talk about the MSBS. This gun is based on a Polish gun that is also called the MSBS, but they added a grot to the end of it to memorialize a Polish military hero. It is a very modular rifle that can go from carbine to DMR and from bullpup to standard configuration since it has a universal upper receiver. If you're not a gun nerd, basically, it's very cool, and it earns even more cool points since 10,000 of these rifles were sent to Ukraine to help put an end to the invasion. In-service tier. After that, we have the Remington R5, which is based on the Remington R5 RGP, a unique rifle made in 2010 that had a strange gas piston operating system somewhere between short and long stroke. However, it was so expensive that it did not sell well and was removed from offer in 2016. Wikipedia cites a weaponsystems.net article on the weapon that says it is currently in service, but I call bullshit on that, since it doesn't say who uses it, and it also says that production started in 2006. Never adopted tier. Next up, we have the SC 2010, which is based on an early photoshopped image of a gun of the same name, which itself is another upgrade of the FN FAL, this time, again, by Peru. Not much is known about this weapon. It doesn't have a Wikipedia page, and all mentions of it on other Wikipedia pages are uncited. For the first time, I'm going to have to put this weapon in a new tier called I Don't Know. Lastly, we have the classic, iconic gun from this game, the Honey Badger. It's an AR derivative made by the AAC and chambered for their 300 Blackout round. This is a real rifle that you can purchase as a civilian, but from a new company simply known as Q, since the original inventor left the AAC company. There was some legal drama that led to the gun being temporarily discontinued, but it is back on store shelves at places like Palmetto State Armory. However, I've seen no data saying that the weapon is in service with anyone, so sadly, I'm going to have to put it in the never adopted tier. Alright, let's look at this tier list. Very interesting, I think. I think it's very interesting how InfinityWard basically didn't invent any guns for this game, like Treyarch did for theirs. Most of these guns are real, and either in service or used to be. However, the kicker is that in the lore of this game, the US basically got blasted into a post-apocalypse in 2017, so most gun development done in the US would have stopped there, and that might have guided the Ghost dev team to pick more realistic and grounded weapons that still have a slight futuristic edge to their aesthetics. Meanwhile, in Black Ops 2, America is still supposed to be the dominant superpower on Earth and still creating new technology, which reflects a different world and thus different weapons. I still think there's a very interesting comparison to be made between the two and what priorities they were going for, and I also really like the South American representation, since most of those countries get ignored in FPS games set in a modern time frame. Overall, this game made a lot of missteps, but the guns were not one of them. They had a lot of flavor and personality, and there were a lot of inspired choices. Anywho, thank you all very much for watching. I was not intending to make this video as quickly as I did, but given the monumental response to the Black Ops 2 video and the request for this specific idea, I had to. And I hope this lives up to the hype from the first one. If you've made it this far and you want me to keep making videos like this, please like, comment, and subscribe to make it known. It helps the channel and the video itself in the algorithm, which lets me work towards the next video even faster. Thank you all again, and I'll see you around.